Welcome, welcome. We're here today with Dolphin Kasper, who's going to be one of our presenters for the Journey to Secure that's happening in exactly a week, actually a little bit less than a week because it starts at 7 a.m. on the 25th Pacific time, but we're really going to be broadcasting everywhere in the world. Wherever you are, it'll be accessible to you. So welcome, Dolphin. I'm super excited to have you today. You bring a particular kind of sense-making to not just to your work, but to attachment theory. And so I'm excited to hear about that. So my first question to you is, how did you come to attachment theory or doing work around it?
Yeah, great question. So, I would say anyone that's doing honest personal development and relational development work is doing attachment work. You can't get away from it. If you listen to like Gordon Neufeld talk about attachment, his framing of it is like this existentially pervasive pull for us to be in relationship. And he goes like beyond, it's like the gravity of life. We need to come together and interact for life to occur and unfold. And love is just the way in which that interaction is most facilitative of evolution. That's sort of how I hear him describe it. And that's how I'm putting words to it in my way. So firstly, I think anyone that's sincerely wanting to learn and grow and evolve and heal is doing attachment work. And so that's been a huge part of my life from as long as I can remember. And more formally, several years ago, I got a job with an agency in Edmonton, Canada, where I was living. And they were doing work with homeless and highly at-risk youth and young adults. And they were using a model of child and youth care called trust-based relational intervention, which was trauma-informed, attachment-centered youth care practice. And that's where I got to really dive into more of the theory and more of the kind of underlying research and practical application of like essentially how do we get people back on a healthy developmental trajectory when trauma and other aspects of insult to our development get in the way or divert us from that optimal development. And so I spent 3 years working with these youth and actually training the staff team and how to implement that model. So that was like a really neat just shift of perspective around how we can make sense of ourselves and our relationships. And again, this practical piece of how do we actually most effectively heal those trauma wounds and those attachment wounds.
Beautiful, beautiful. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to engaging with our own attachment wounds?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the best way in because it's such a profound question. I think one of the greatest challenges around attachment for modern humans is that we now have a society and lifestyle that grows from that society that has where we don't need each other in the way that we have throughout our evolutionary history. We also have access to unlimited ways to distract and numb and mitigate discomfort in our lives, where the whole kind of underlying unspoken thing is like we should feel better versus worse. We should feel good versus bad. We should feel pleasure versus pain. Even if we're not speaking it, there's a kind of underlying underpinning of the kind of MO of our culture. And then I would say primarily designed that way because that allows us to sell each other things. That there's this sort of marketing paradigm where if I can tell you that your life shouldn't be the way it is, it should be this other way that feels and looks better, I'm way more able to sell you whatever it is that I want to sell you. And so that as a kind of pervasive way that we've grown up, and then we take it on. Even if consciously we think, well, no, I understand that discomfort is needed, or I understand that facing my fears is good. In our system, we've just had so many opportunities to outsource our own experience through technology, through substances, through behaviors, all of it. And so one of the biggest challenges we face in healing our attachment wounds is to recontextualize and to create a bit of a different priority around this spectrum of comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain. And if we can do that, I would say that opens up a massive doorway and a more transformative space where we can start to make sense of the difference between something that feels bad and should be addressed and changed versus something that feels bad and we're actually meant to be in it and lean into it and work with it. And the distinction between those two is not easy, especially for those of us that grew up in this modern Western culture.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. I threw a question at you, and out of curiosity, and it's just beautiful to witness you in this sort of like, breaking down the puzzle and then extracting just the most salient pieces. At least for me, it's very satisfying. So thank you for that. So you're bringing some classes. I don't know if it's going to relate to your answer, but you're bringing 2 classes to the Journey to Secure, which to me are more on the relational spectrum or more on the sense-making spectrum. So can you say more about those?
Yeah, so the first one, and I ordered them very particularly for the conference, for the summit. The first one I call decoding the human condition. And this is my particular take or my particular way of sense making around this vehicle, this human condition piece. It's brilliant, it's amazing, it's complex, it's magical, and extremely challenging and often uncomfortable to be in, and often very challenging to make sense of. And so what I'm going to bring with the decoding the human condition is I'm going to essentially lay out my interpretation of attachment in terms of the human condition and like how the human system and the relational systems function. And I'm going to infuse a couple of pieces that I don't see or hear spoken about much around attachment that to me actually create a more comprehensive and a more adaptive way of making sense of attachment that actually gives us, it's more like I don't need to lean on the model as much anymore. I can use the model to make sense. And then I have a kind of inner compass that helps me take it to those next steps. I know I've heard you speak about like models are incredible in ways that they're incredible, and they're highly limiting if we believe that the model is it. Like the map and the terrain, right? It just, the model is incredibly helpful to get a snapshot, to simplify things that are just incredibly complex. And then we want to be able to actually meet the complexity of life in its fullness. So that's the first one. I think it's going to be really powerful for people that have been on a healing journey. If you've done some reading or researching or discovery of attachment, it's going to be great. It's also going to be good for people that are coming to attachment newly, because I think I have a way of speaking it that is a bit different. So there's books out there you can read that are more kind of that mainstream, and then I think I bring in our ways to articulate it and ways to connect dots that again help to create a more complete picture for it. And then the second offering is really like, where does the rubber hit the road? How do we create these shifts, these transformations, or these breakthroughs? And of course, when you learn about relationship, you know that like our internal dynamic, our internal structure, neurological kind of conditioning and how that's all put together is so closely linked to the kinds of structures and dynamics and the way in which external relationships work. So you can't atomize those. You can't put those in silos. Outer work around relationship includes inner work, and inner work around relationship includes outer work. You can't separate them. And you can have a focus. You can really do some deep inner work that doesn't necessarily include a particular other. And that's potent and powerful. And then there's external work we can do that doesn't require us to be exceptionally aware of our inner pieces. So, and of course, the oscillation back and forth between inner and outer, I think bears the greatest fruit around relational transformation.
Beautiful. I'm excited to be there. In fact, I want to be to all the classes, and there's really 8 classes a day, 5 days of classes. And obviously some people will miss some of them. And so that's why we're recording them. So, and then we'll be spoon feeding it to people for weeks after the journey. And so tell us a little bit about the work that you do outside of this, so that people know that if they come and witness what you're going to be teaching, they also get to have access to you later on and maybe work with you.
Yeah. So, I've done quite a bit of one-to-one and couples coaching. Most of the work I've done has been on the deeper side of like creating internal and personal breakthroughs. And over the last several years, it's really shifted towards intimate and kind of primary or kind of essential relationships in our lives. How do we create significant lasting breakthroughs in those relationships, regardless of the current state of those relationships? So I feel like I bring a piece to the table for people that might feel hopeless, they might feel like they've done it all, they might feel like, it's just impossible. I think I'm the kind of person you want to go to if you think it's impossible, but you're not ready to give up. Or maybe you've had ideas that it's impossible and it's not, like, you're not ready to give up. And the reason that I frame it that way is because ultimately, when I look at life always finds a way. It's the nature of life to find a way. Now, in the short term, you may look at what's going on and it may look utterly impossible to figure out how that could be so. But I'm often touched when you're walking down the street and you're walking along a paved sidewalk and you see those cracks in the sidewalk, and then you see this little plant, right, growing out of, like, it's basically a little tiny bit of dirt and dust, almost no water, and life is finding a way. And so if you are still in touch with a kind of sliver or seed of life and relationship in the midst of a relationship that it's not easy to see that, something is possible there. And so the work is really about reconnecting people to their own trust in life. I think that's a primary aspect of the work that I do. And then once we trust life again, now things are really possible. Oftentimes people don't trust life, and then they're busy trying to make life better. And those two, it's just a massive piece of ambivalence that makes it impossible to really heal and to create wholeness in relationships. So, and then I use all sorts of magical tools and tricks and, somatic awareness and mindfulness and different kinds of non-violent communication style practices and approaches to communication in real time. But, my magic is reconnecting people with a trust in life, a trust in themselves, and the real tools that they need to transform things on the outside.
Amazing. I want to say that for all the times that I've known you, one of the things that has struck me the most is you touched on a piece around, I'm going to call it motivation. There's just something behind, like, a lot of people like they're handling what's happening and the feelings that are coming up and the difficulties that are coming up. But I feel like you're able to get under and support the element of motivation, like actors, they always ask, like, what's my motivation, what's my purpose, where am I coming from, that I essentially I want to take this on, I want to take on this relationship, I want to find what's behind all the weakness and the loss of power, and sort of create that from the ground up. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I love that analogy of the actor, because what you bring in with that analogy is that there's the act, and then there's the one acting. Yeah. And when it comes to our experience in life, most people in today's modern world are kind of asleep in some way. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's not meant to point fingers or make anyone wrong about anything. It's that we've forgotten that we are a kind of conscious presence at the heart of our experience. We're not the experience we're having. And so, for us to remain aware that I am a space within which my life happens, and then the contents within that space are my experience, including my sense of self. And so if I'm not aware of that, if I'm not aware of this, I think of it as a dimensional piece. So there's what we're used to in this three-dimensional space, and somehow there's a fourth dimension of us. Now, I'm not talking about time. There's a fourth kind of spatial dimension that holds the content of our experience, thoughts, feelings, somatic, even our movements. And if I know that the space that the content unfolds in is different than the content itself, even though it often feels like there's no difference, somehow now I have agency where a moment ago I did not. This is what people who experience a shift through mindfulness or meditation are experiencing. They're experiencing a shift in context, a shift in the space that holds the content of their experience. And once we're aware of that difference, agency is there where it wasn't. And so if we want to think about significant transformation, especially if we're talking about something that includes trauma, which brings with it striking, powerful, visceral experience in our system that is impossible to ignore. I think the assumption, or a lot of times the narrative I hear, and this is where, I'm going to not push back, but I'm going to say I disagree with a lot of people that are bringing in what is often called a trauma-informed perspective, is that just because I'm in the midst of a system freeze or a system overload because of a traumatic experience, doesn't mean that that other dimension of us, the dimension that is the space within which that frozen state or that overloaded state is happening, doesn't still exist. And so there's this almost invisible dimension of agency that's really about how am I relating to this experience, including experience of freeze. So you can be in the midst of an experience of freeze. Your system can be doing everything it's doing around that experience of freeze. And you can say, okay, I'm frozen right now.
Right.
And if you can find the agency to say, I'm okay with that, that choice to be okay with the current state of things is like the key to the lock around either perpetuating our trauma as a cyclical action or infusing that movement with something genuinely new that allows it to become a spiral up into integration versus like a dead loop that just feeds back on itself.
So good. I had shivers when you were saying that, because for me, I interpret that as like what they call the witness in spirituality. It's this sort of the side of you, or the bigger side of you, or whatever you want to call that, that's basically witnessing everything that's happening inside. So, and there's also something related to, for me, around Keegan's levels of neurological development, where you basically at the next level, you disidentify with the previous level. And so instead of being that you actually have an experience of, you're having an experience that you can choose not to have, or you can choose to evolve, or you can choose to change, or you can choose to look at differently.
Yeah, and that's where I wouldn't frame it that way. Like when I look at how it's like Ken Wilber. I think you're probably aware of Ken Wilber and yes, his kind of levels of consciousness,
stages, and
he talks about transcendence being moving past and including. And so when I have an experience where my context shifts and I realize I'm more than I thought I was a moment ago.
Right.
It's not about choosing a different experience. The experience may or may not change, but somehow in the midst of the experience, I know that something has shifted. I have shifted in relation to the experience.
Right.
And now the experience may still be unfolding, but often what we'll have is we'll have an experience of perspective in the midst of the experience versus just the closed experience with no perspective. So like anger is a great example. I can be in the midst of hot anger where I genuinely want to jump across the table and strangle someone. And then something will shift. Nothing has changed on the surface. I'm still feeling this tension and this heat in my body and these thoughts in my head, but something shifts where I'm able to go, wow, I am so furious right now. The physical sensation takes time to dissipate. So this is not like it's not like a wand or a finger wag where I just become the ultimate chooser of my experience. I think that's fantasy. There is a kind of momentum and an integrative process involved in a big experience dissipating. But the way we hold the present moment in the current state of experience has so much to do with that dissipation, or whether things keep cyclically, revolving back and feeding back on themselves. That's what a panic attack is. A panic attack is a certain touch of anxiety that doesn't have room to move and dissipate, and so it feeds back, and each time it does, it gets louder, and just like a feedback loop in a sound system, it's the same thing. And so the question becomes like, where is that point within that system where it can be open to dissipate, or where is the agency where we close that circuit and it becomes a closed loop? That's the conscious agency I'm really talking about.
Yeah. So and it's interesting because in previous videos with other with other people I've interviewed for this Journey to Secure, I've been speaking about, where we're on a trajectory of behavior and experience. Where can you start to have agency and start to choose a different path. And so, yeah, we could talk about this for a long time. I love geeking out with you. But we have to go. So I would love to ask you for one last question. It sounds like you're bringing a bonus offering to the table. So for people who are signing up, you'll be getting all the bonus offerings offered by some of the teachers. And so as a way of thanking you for joining us and trusting us on this journey to secure. So can you tell us about yours?
Yeah, sure. So what I initially offered is essentially a relationship assessment survey that allows you to really go through, reflect on your past, reflect on current dynamics, look at what you really want to create. And it's something that would allow me to even follow up and provide some extra support to you around next steps for yourself. And just in speaking with Philippe at the beginning, I'm also going to be offering a downloadable workbook that does some of the same things, but digs a little bit more into where you're coming from, this motivation piece that we spoke about earlier. So both of those will be available through the journey to secure.
So good, so good. I'm so excited to witness you teach. I don't know that I've actually seen you even at the festival. I don't think I saw you teach at all. We did a piece together, but now I'm just gonna get to sit back and watch you and your brilliance. Amazing. Well, we'll see you again in just a few days. And if you're watching this and you're excited and you're getting excited about what's possible for you, where you can alter the course of your life and have more agency in your life as it pertains to attachment theory and insecurity and becoming a more secure human, so you can make better choices for yourself and for the people that you love, then come and join us for the journey to secure. And if you're listening to this, then I'm going to give you a discount code. I'm just going to double check that I have the right one, and it's going to be called, hang on, it's going to be called Join Us on the Journey. So if you enter that discount code, you'll get a $50 discount, so you can join us for $97. And that's for 20 presenters, 35 sessions that are all going to be recorded, plus 8 bonus offerings. So I think it's a good deal. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks, Philippe.